Good morning and welcome to Iridium Rock and Metal Reviews. Today I'm going to do another ranking of the year, and that's 1997. So this is, in my opinion, obviously, a poor year for good releases. In fact, I could only come up with four, and then not even any honourable mentions really, but I will mention a couple, but I wouldn't really call them honourable, but that might be on other people's lists. So it's going to be a bit of a short video, this one. But here we go. So I've only got four. So remember, these are my top four for that year. And they go from my least favourite to my favourite. So I'm going to start with number four, and that's Silverchair and Freak Show. So this was Silverchair's second album, and I preferred it over the first one. I thought on the first one, they obviously came out in the grunge era. They're an Australian band actually, and they were likened, to Nirvana and stuff like that. And I probably on their first album, I'd say I sort of agree with that. They was going for that sound a bit too much, if you know what I mean. But on this second one, they sort of expanded their sound a little bit, got a bit more experimental, and sort of, if you like, were trying to be their own band. And I liked it a lot more. But you know what, this hasn't had the staying power for me, but I remember at the time it was quite a big album for me. Couldn't stop playing it. And the single Freak was good. That was probably one of the heaviest songs on the album. Slave was a good song, and also you had Petrol and Chlorine, which was a bit more of an experimental song, and this is where they was like going into their, trying different stuff and even different sort of instruments on the albums. They weren't just going for guitar, drums and that. There was other stuff being played. So there's quite an experimental band when they actually got going. And this was, like I said, this was quite a big album for me at the time, but don't really play it anymore. But it did make it into the top four. But I'm going to give Silverchair and Freak Show 6 out of 10. Next on the list, number 3, Savatage, The Wake of Magellan. So I was as some people might have heard already, I was a bit of a latecomer to Savatage. Well, I sort of got hold of their couple of albums in the 80s when the Hall of the Mountain King and Gutter Ballet came out. I really liked those, but I don't know, when I was in my 20s, I sort of like left Savatage behind a little bit. I was still into heavy metal music, always have been, but for some reason they went by the wayside. I sort of wish they didn't. But I've come back like lately, last a few months. I've been listening to all their discography, and you can easily say they're one of the most consistent bands through the 90s, and that was probably what the 90s was lacking. There was lacking some of them bands still bringing out new releases, and that's why I've got such a short list here. But you know what I mean, it's like you realise what a good band they are now when you look back. And the good thing about Savatage for me is I don't think their music will ever get old. It'll be something you can listen to in years to come. And the variation on their albums, I mean, you get some bands that they make the same song. Every track of the album's not the same song with different arrangements. These guys really knew how to mix it up. They were one of the best at that. And this was a brilliant album as well. So I'll give this Savatage. Sorry, let's name a couple of tracks. Sorry, they were some of my favourites. The title tracks, I love it. The Hourglass, Turn to Me or Turns to Me. That was a really good song as well. So I've really got into this band, and the fans. This is one of them bands where the fans are really, they really hooked on the band. They won't have anything bad to say about them, and I can see why. They are, do you know what I mean? They're probably underrated, and a lot of fans get defensive over it because they are underrated, and they should have been big. You know what I mean? They should have been bigger than what they were, or and that's a fact. So I'd give Savatage, The Wake of Magellan, 8 out of 10. Right, my number 2. Bruce Dickinson, Accident of Birth. So I do like Bruce Dickinson's solo stuff. I think it got better and better as the albums went on. I did like the first couple, but they weren't included in any of my lists. But this definitely is. I think, well, obviously the addition of Adrian Smith came with Bruce on this one, and you can see like the improvement, the quality. You know, it gone right up. It was definitely shades of Maiden more than there was in the previous albums. I think the production was better on here. On the first couple of albums, I don't know, the production, especially the drum sound for me, it sort of like was a bit, it didn't put me up. You know, you need a good drum sound, especially on the snare, and it sort of like it hindered the songs a little bit for me, but they were still good. But this one, I think he really stepped it up, Bruce, on this one. And some of the really good tracks on here, Freak, Star Children, Taking the Queen, brilliant track. Ark of Space, Man of Sorrows, some real good tracks that some of these would fit in, especially now, on a Maiden album. And that's saying something, because Maiden albums are good now. So, yeah, Bruce done really well on this one. And I'll give Bruce Dickinson, Accident of Birth, 8 out of 10. Here comes my number one. So my number one is Deftones, Around the Fur. So this is, for me, a really big improvement on the first album. This is yet again a band finding its feet. You know what I mean? Really honing in on the sound and what they was going to become. I think the first album was a bit more, I don't know, I'm not saying it sounded like every other band, because Deftones have always sounded different, but you know, but with this Around the Fur, they really like showed like this is what we're all about. There was some experimental stuff in there. Obviously the influences coming from not just metal. I know Chino Marino's a Depeche Mode fan and stuff like that, so you can hear those influences coming from other music, but never waning from the metal side. Obviously, you know, still heavy as fuck. My Own Summer, what a track that is. And the funny thing about that is it's not a real complex song. In fact, they near enough use the same riff at the beginning of the song, and then when it gets heavy, but just a heavier version of the same riff, and it just hits you like fucking hell. Like, you know, like anything, like they are superb when they really hit it heavy. Around the Fur, good track. Be Quiet and Drive, what a brilliant track that was. That's probably my favourite track at the time when this came out. What a groove to that song. Absolutely superb. Die of the Flu was a good one. MX closing the album out. Obviously there's that big bit on the end of the album, but you know, the MX track on its own, absolutely brilliant. It was a massive improvement on the debut album for me. The only thing that why it didn't get a 10 out of 10 for me, and it's going to get a 9 out of 10. I think some of the more hardcore tracks, some of the I know they like to mix it up, but some of the screaming sometimes for me, you know, I'm not a fan of that. I'm more of a fan of singing. But you know, I think at times in there on the album it's called for, like especially on My Own Summer, it just adds something to it, but other tracks maybe not. But very strong album, and there was still really good albums to come from Deftones as well. So I'd give like I said, Deftones Around the Fur, 9 out of 10. So yeah, brilliant. A couple of I'm going to mention them, but not honourable mentions for me, because they were a bit disappointments for bands, considering they were good bands. So that's Judas Priest, Jugulator. Yeah, not so good. Pretty Maids, Spooked. So these were actually the only couple of albums I could come up with, and they weren't favourites of mine from them bands either, even though I like those bands. So that's it. I'm actually going to do a couple of reviews later on. There's a couple of new albums out, so keep tuned for those. I might put them on tomorrow morning. So right, cheers for listening. Hope you like 1997, and I'll see you soon.